We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Hamid Beis and Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 75b. On the previous Amud Rabbi Yochanan said that it's only by a true hodah, meaning by an admission where you're actually being mechayiv yourself something. So then we say that if Edom come later on and try to be mechayiv you in the knas part, you don't have to pay the knas. We say moda b'knas v'yachar kach bo Edom is pater. Meaning to say, let's say a person would admit that he stole something, so he's being mechayiv himself in the keren. He has to pay the principal, but he doesn't have to pay the kefil, the dalet v'hei, because that's a knas, moda b'knas pater. And then we would say that even if Edom come later regarding the kefil, regarding the dalet v'hei, still we're going to say he doesn't have to pay that because he already had a real hodah where he admitted to something and he was mechayiv himself. But Rabbi Yochanan said, let's say he would admit to something and it would only get him out of the knas, meaning to say he was already chayiv to pay for the keren, and then he's admitting in terms of the tvichu mechira, so in terms of that dalet v'hei he's admitting and just trying to get out of the fine, but that admission is not causing him to be chayiv anything. So with that kind of admission, if Edom would later come, he actually would still have to pay for the knas. And Rav Ashi said that our Mishnah and also the Brisa supports what Rabbi Yochanan said. And we're in the middle of the proof from our Mishnah, and the Gemara continues, Elalav, rather is it not. Why is it that our Mishnah is specifically talking about a scenario where there are Edom on the Geneva and he's only admitting to the Tvicha and the Mechira? It's for this exact reason. HaKamash Malan, the Mishnah is teaching as follows. Gonav al pi shnayim, in a case where there are two witnesses that he stole, V'tavach al pi eidecharo al pi atzmo, but he slaughtered it either through one witness testified that he slaughtered it, or he admitted, so hu delo mechayev atzmo bekeren, in that case, where he was not mechayev himself with his admission in the keren, so hu di amrin, and then we say, al pi atzmo dum yada al pi eidechad, then we say that the admission is similar to the eidechad in the sense that, ma al pi eidechad ki yosei eidechad mitzaref b'hadei mechayev, just like by eidechad, we made this comparison earlier, just like by eidechad, if another aid would come, we would join the two eidim together and we would say he was chayev. So the same thing is true here. Al pi atzmo nami, so too, in a case of al pi atzmo where he is admitting, Kiyasu Edom chayiv. When Edom comes, he's going to be chayiv in that case, because that's a case of moda b'knas v'yachar kach bo Edom that's chayiv, because that original admission was not mechayiv him in anything. He was already mechayiv in the keren from Edom. Aval gana v'tavach u'machar al pi edechor or al pi atzmo. But let's say the stealing and the slaughtering or the selling, that's all. All of that is through one aid, or all of that is through admission. The chayiv atzmo b'keren, and in the case of admission, he's being mechayiv himself in the keren. That's like a true hodah, so to speak. So there, lo amrin al pi atzmo. There we don't make the comparison between al pi atzmo and al pi echad. We don't say over there that if the Edom come later on, he's going to be chayiv, because he will not be chayiv in that case. There he had a true admission where he was mechayiv himself in the keren. So in such a situation, even if Edom come later, he's not going to have to pay the kefil and the dalet v'hei. And the Gemara continues, Brisa. What is the Brisa that supports Rabbi Yochanan? The Tanya, as we learned in the Brisa. Ra Edom shemim mashmashin uvoin. If a person sees that Edom are coming, they're about to testify against him. V'yamar ganafti, and he says, I stole, he admits to that. Avalo tavachti v'lo macharti, but he says, I didn't slaughter, or I didn't sell the animal. Eino meshalim ela keren. So in that case, he only pays the keren, because again, he is admitting to what happened, and therefore, since he is admitting to what happened, we say, moda b'knas is pater, he only has to pay the keren. And so the Gemara says, Lama li l'misna v'yamar ganavti, avalo tavachti v'lo macharti. Why does it have to say in this brisa that he's admitting I stole, but I didn't slaughter, I didn't sell? Nisni ganavti, let it teach that I stole, o tavachti umacharti, or let it teach that I slaughtered, that I sold. Why does the admission specifically have to be only on the stealing and not an admission on the tvich and the mechira? Eloha kamashmon, rather the Brisa is teaching us exactly this idea. Time amar ganavti hu dechayev atzmo bekeren. It's only because he said I stole, because he admitted to that part where he's mechayev himself in the principle to pater. So that's why in that case he would be pater. It's a true hodah, and even if Edom come later, he's going to be pater. Avalamar lo ganavti. But let's say he says, I didn't steal. Uvo Edom shaganav, and Edom said that he did steal. The chazar v'yamar tavachti u'macharti, and then he goes and he says, I slaughtered or I sold it. The admission is only on the knas. Ubo Edom shetavach u'machar, and then Edom come and say that again, he either slaughtered it or sold it. To lo chayev atzman v'keren, in that case, where he was not mechayev himself with his hodah in the keren, chayev, he would be chayev. Alma hodah de tvicha lav hodahi. And so you see again that the admission by the tvich is not really considered a hodah in such a situation. If he would be moda in that fashion, and it's not mechayiv him anything, we would say if it's moda b'knas v'yachar kach bo Edom, he still would be chayiv. And the Gemara responds, Amri, they said, lo, no, it's not necessarily a proof from this brisa, because he gufa kamashwan, it could be that the brisa is trying to teach the chiddush of the case it itself is talking about in the following way. The kaven damar ganafti, because since he said ganafti, he admits that he stole. He says I stole, and therefore he's patur from the kefel. Afal gav damar lo tavachti v'lo macharti, even though he said that I didn't slaughter, or he said I didn't sell, so there was no admission in terms of the tvicha and the mechira. So you'll say maybe there's no mode of beknas patur at all in terms of the tvicha and the mechira. Uvo Edom shetavachu machar, and then Edom come and they say that he did slaughter or he did sell it. Pater, he is still going to be pater, even though you may have said that hodah shouldn't count because he wasn't admitting to the tvicha and the mechir in the first place. My time, and what's the reason why he's pater? Because tashlumi chamisha amar achmana, the pasuk says you pay 5 times the amount. Velo tashlumi arba, it's not 4 times the amount. Here, once he's gotten rid of the kefil, so it's taking it down one amount. Velo tashlumi shlosha, and again it says 4 times the amount, not 3 times the amount. That's the same idea, and so therefore we're saying once there was an admission on the geneva, which took away the kefil, that admission already counts legabe the dalid vehei. And the Gemara continues, Lema ketanoi, let us say that this is a machlokas tanoi, meaning if you have a hodah that's not a real hodah, that's not mechayiv in anything, is that the kind of hodah that we would say moda beknas v'yachar kach bo edom is potter or not? The Brisa says, Hayushnayim me'idin shaganav, if 2 witnesses testify that he stole, Hayushnayim me'idin oso shatavachu machar, and 2 witnesses testify that he slaughtered it or he sold it. Huzmu ede geneva, if the edim who testify that he stole, if they are falsified, eda shabat l'miksasa bat l'kula. We say that since part of that testimony has been nullified, the entire thing is nullified. Once you get rid of the ede geneva, you get rid of all the edus. Huzmu ede tavicha. If the ede tavicha are falsified, hu meshalim tashlume kefil. So he's going to have to pay kefil because there are still edim that he stole. He has to pay the kefil. Vehein meshalim tashlume shlosha, and they, meaning the edim zomimin, who tried to get him to pay the additional 3 times the amount, now they have the punishment of kasher zamam. They have to pay 3 times the amount. Mishum sumchas amru. In the name of sumchas, they said, hein meshalmin tashlume kefil. They have to pay the payment of kefil. V'hu meshalim tashlume shlosha lepar ushnayim la'ayil, and he has to pay 3 times the amount for a bull and 2 times the amount for a ram. And the Gemara says, Ahaya koi sumchis. What case is sumchis going on? Ilema aresh, if you're going to say that sumchas is going on the first case, meaning to say the first case was where 2 witnesses testify that he stole, and 2 witnesses say tvichu mechira, and it's the ede geneva that were huzmu, it's the ede geneva that were falsified, and it's on that sumchas is saying if they pay kefil and he pays the tashlume shlosh lapor shnayim la'ayil, lesle l'sumchas ede shabat l'miksasa bat l'kula. Do you think sumchas does not agree with the idea of ede shabat l'miksasa bat l'kula, that if it's partially nullified testimony, you throw out the entire testimony? Of course, sumchas would agree. Meaning to say, of course, sumchas would agree that if the ede geneva are the ones that are falsified, we would say ede shabat l'miksasa bat l'kula, and that would be the end of it. V'elo ha-seifa. So rather, you have to say that sumchas is going on the seifa, sumchas is going on the case where it's the ede tvicha that are falsified. So shaber klami rabbanim, but there the rabbanim are saying the correct halacha. Hu mishalim tashlume kefil. He has to pay kefil because the ede geneva are still intact. V'hei mishalim tashlume shlosha, and they're going to pay the 3 times the amount because they were edim zomin on the tvicha. And so how do we understand what sumchas is saying in this brisa? And so the Gemara says, Ela milsa acharisa ika benai. You have to say that there's some other dispute between them in the following scenario. Kagon da'asu beitrei, 2 witnesses come. Amri le ganafta, they say to him, you stole. Amar lahu, so he says to them, in ganavti v'tavachti macharti. Yes, I stole, and I slaughtered, or I sold it. Miu lo bifnechem ganavti, but nevertheless, I didn't do it in front of you. V'yaisi sahadi v'azminu de lo ba'apayu ganav, and then he brings witnesses, and they actually do the hazama, they falsify these witnesses, and they say, he did steal, but it was not in front of these witnesses. V'yaisi balabayas sahadi v'asidu be, and then the balabayas comes and he brings witnesses, the ganav v'tavachu machar, that the person stole, and the person slaughtered, or the person sold it. And they're arguing about this admission when it comes to the tvicha. The Rabbanan savri, because the Rabbanan hold afagav the hodah de geneva machmas edim hu de kamoda. Even though when he admitted to the stealing, he did that because there were edim against him. Hodah de tvicha hodah. He still, the admission of the tvicha is still considered to be a good admission. Upater, and therefore he's pater on that. The sumchis savar, but sumchis holds kevon de hodah de geneva machmas edim, who since the entire admission on the geneva was because there were edim against him, the kamoda, that's why he was admitting. So therefore, the tvicha lav hodah, therefore the admission that he did on the tvicha is not considered to be a hodah. It's not considered to be an admission. V'hanoch edim kamoy daz minhu mishalmen tashlumei kefel, and those first edim that they were falsified, they're going to pay the kefel. V'hu mishalem shlosha laparu shnayim la'ayil, and he's going to pay 3 times the amount for the bull and 2 times the amount for the ram. And Rashi explains, let us say that this is a machlokas ta'anoim, hodah de tvicha, meaning the admission, in terms of the admission on the tvicha, on the slaughtering, I hodah have below hodah de geneva, is that considered a real hodah if he doesn't admit to the geneva? To lo mechayiv atzma b'karen, because there he's not even being mechayiv himself in the principle. Lepotru and bo edom olo, so therefore do we say that that's enough of an admission to exempt him if edom come or not? But lakulo, so then we brought this price, and again the Brisa said, once you get rid of the ed de geneva, so it's all nullified. To kavan de logan, of lo tavach, because if he didn't steal, so the slaughtering is nothing either. V'harishonim mishalman kefil. So therefore, if they were falsified, those first witnesses who testified on the geneva that were falsified, they have to pay kefil. V'hu pater, and he's going to be pater. V'achronim pater, and also the later edom are going to be pater, because again, that entire part of the edus is thrown out. And Rashi continues, Huzmu Eidei Tvicha, on the other hand, if it's the Eidei Tvicha that were falsified, V'lo Eidei Geneva, not the Eidei Geneva, V'hein Meshalmen Tashlumei Shlosha, so in that case, those Eidei Tvicha, they have to pay 3 times the amount. L'Ganav, they have to pay that to the Ganav, because that's the extra amount that they were trying to be Mechayev him. And then the Gemara said, what exactly is Sumchas saying? Ilay Maresh, if you're going to say that Sumchas is going on the beginning of the Brisa, meaning the Huzmu Eidei Geneva, meaning Sumchas is going on the case where the Eidei Geneva were the ones that were falsified, then we threw out the rest of the witnesses. The Ka'amar Sumchas, and then Sumchas is saying, Hein Mishalman Kefel, they pay Kefel B'Shvilo L'Bailam K'Mishpato, they pay the Kefel instead to the Bailam as the law would be. V'hu Mishalim, and he's going to pay Shlosha Misham Tvicha, he's going to pay 3 times the amount because of the slaughtering. The Eidei Tvicha Lo Huzmu, because you're going to say the Eidei Tvicha were not falsified, meaning to say, maybe what Sumchas is saying is, the Eidei Geneva and the Reisha, they were falsified, so they have to pay Kasher Zomam, they have to pay Kefel. But the Eidei Tvicha who were not falsified, so therefore their Eidus remains intact, and therefore he has to pay 3 times the amount, but that wouldn't make any sense. V'leslei l'Sumchas v'chulu, do you think Sumchas doesn't hold Eidus Shabbat l'Miksasa, but l'Kula? Havadai Kevin de lo Ganav lo Tavach, certainly if there was no Geneva, then the Tvicha is meaningless, and of course, Sumchas would agree on that. Elalav al karchach milsa achrisi. So then the Gemara said you have to say that Sumchas is going on something completely different. Milsa achrisi amar Rabbanan. The Rabbanan said something else. The koi Sumchas Allah, and Sumchas is going on that. V'lo mashkachas to take milsa the Sumchas atana kama shaper. We really can't fit the words of Sumchas with what the Tana Kama said properly. Elahachi could go into also unless we say the following is the case. And again, the case is that Edom come and they say that he stole, and he says in Ganafta, he says yes, I did steal. V'hachodah de ganav lav hodahi. Now that admission that he stole, the ganav, that's not a real admission. The machmas hani Edom de ka'amri le ganafta hu demod. He's only admitting because those Edom said that he stole something. Aval hodah de tvichu mechira. However, when it comes to the fact that he added to his admission and he said that I also slaughtered, I also sold it, lav machmas biyususayu odi. He didn't admit because he was scared of them. Dalo amri le tavachta le ganafta. They didn't say anything about slaughtering. They said that he stole. And so therefore, again, that admission on the Tvicha Mechira, that's a real admission. And Rashi continues, V'yaisi balabayas sahadi achrini, then the balabayas comes and brings other witnesses. The gana v'tavachu that indeed this person did steal, he slaughtered or he sold it. V'ko'amri rabbanan, and so then the rabbanan say, Dehein mishalmen tashlumei kefel leganav, that the first witnesses, the ones who were falsified, who said that he stole, they have to pay kefel to the ganav. They get the punishment of kasher zamam. That's what they tried to make the ganav pay. V'haganav l'bailim, and the ganav actually does have to pay to the owners. V'hu pater midalid v'hei, but he is pater from dalid v'hei to ha'odi atvicha, because he did admit on the slaughtering v'hodahi, and that is considered to be an admission. Meaning to say, the admission that he did on the geneva, that doesn't count at all, because there were already edom against him when it came to the geneva. Therefore, he does have to pay that kefil, but he does get out of the dalid v'hei, because that was considered to be an admission. Now, even though the balabayas brought witnesses against him that he stole, pater, he's still going to be pater on the tvicha, on the dalid v'hei of the tvicha. To hodah gemuri, it's considered to be a full admission. Even though it was not an admission that made him chayiv in anything, he didn't have to pay the principal based on that admission. And then Sumchas is saying to them, he's saying back to the Rabbanan, Hein Meshalman Kefel. Again, they pay Kefel because they're Edom Zomamin. V'hu Meshalim Tashlumei Shlosha, and he pays 3 times the amount, to hodah de tvicha lav hodahi, because that admission of the tvicha is not considered a real admission, Sharei Pater Atzma Miklum, because it was an admission that completely exempted himself. That's not considered to be a real admission, and so since there are witnesses against him on the tvicha, he does have to pay that amount. And Rashi continues, Rabbanon Savri Afagav the Geneva Machmas Edim Kamoda, even though the admission on the Geneva was cause of Edim, the Eino Hodan, that's not considered an admission. The Chayiv L'Shan L'Bailam also Kefil Shanot Al Me'elo, and he's going to have to pay the original owner the Kefil that he's taking from these first Edim Zomamin. But Hodad, the Tvicha, but the admission of the slaughtering, the Lav Machmas Biasusa, that wasn't out of fear. He wasn't concerned with the Edim on that. Odi Mia Hodah, he said, therefore, since he didn't admit out of fear, that is considered to be a Hodah. Upater Midalid Vehen is going to be potter from Dalid Vehei. Afagav the potter asma miklum behodazu, even though this admission completely exempted him, the hodasha ganafti commandam or lo ganafti dummy, because the admission on ganafti didn't count. That would be the same thing if he said I didn't steal. The machmas kamayodi, he's just admitting because of the fact that they were edim against him. Umad mechayev v'keren v'kefel, the only reason he's chayev on keren and kefel misham edus v'achronamu, that's because of the later witnesses. V'lav misham hodah, so it has nothing to do with his hodah. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravacha B'Reid Ravika, Ravacha B'Reid Ravika says, Lo no, the Kuli Alma Hodah the Tvicha Lav Hodah. It could be that in this brisa, all of the Tanoim agree that the admission just on the slaughtering is not considered to be an admission, and if Eidim would come later and testify, the person would actually have to pay the knas that relates to the Tvicha. He would have to pay the extra 3 times the amount. The actual machlokas here between the Rabbanan and Sumchis is about Eidus Shiatayachol Azima, which means if you have testimony that cannot be falsified. The classic case of testimony that cannot be falsified is if the Eidim testify in a way that is vague, you can't pin down exactly when the incident occurred, so then you can't really falsify them because you can't say you were with us on that day if the exact time is not pinned down. But the Gemara is using that term in a different fashion over here as follows. For example, the case could be as follows. Witnesses come. V'yamri le ganafti, and they say you stole. V'yamar lehu, and he says to them, ganafti v'tavachti u'macharti, that I did steal, and I slaughtered, or I sold it. Miu lo bifnechem ganafti. Nevertheless, it wasn't in front of you that I stole. Ela bifnei ploni u ploni. Rather, I stole in front of so-and-so and so-and-so. That's the idea that it's iyatayachol azima. You can't falsify it because he's admitting that those other witnesses were there. I stole in front of ploni u ploni. V'yaisi sahadi v'azminu deloba payoganav. And then he brings witnesses that falsify that first set of witnesses and say that he did not steal in front of them. V'yasu ploni u ploni. And then the ploni and ploni that he mentioned that he did steal in front of, they come. V'yasidu bei deganav v'tavachu machar. And they testify that indeed he stole and he slaughtered and he sold. Uvahakam miflagi, and this is what they're arguing about. The Rabbanon Savri, the Rabbanon hold Havala Eidos Shiatayachol Azima. The second set of witnesses, the Ploni and Ploni that come in and they testify that he stole and he slaughtered and he sold. So that testimony is Eidos Shiatayachol Azima because he's already supporting that Eidos. V'chol Eidos Shiatayachol Azima lo have Eidos, and therefore any testimony that's impossible to falsify is not considered to be Eidos at all. So all we really have over here is the admission, and that's why according to the Rabbanon, he's just going to pay the principal in this situation. But Sumchis holds Eidos Shiatayachol Azima have Eidos. The testimony that you can't falsify, it's still considered to be Eidos, and so therefore, if it's considered to be Eidos, we would say there really is a testimony over here that he stole and he slaughtered and he sold, and so therefore he would have to pay in this case. And Rashi explains, Lo no, de kuli alma hodah de tvicha below hodah de geneva lav klumi. It could be everybody agrees that if a person admits to slaughtering without admitting to the geneva, that's not an admission, or not enough of an admission, lepotro b'makam edim, that would not exempt him if edim come in. Kirab Yochanan, it could be everybody agrees with Rabbi Yochanan. V'hani sahadi basroi sadusam al yusahave. And therefore, if these later witnesses were real witnesses, lo have patri le rabbanan, the rabbanan would not exempt him from paying that extra 3 times the amount because it wasn't a real admission. Elohacha be'edus shiatayachol hazim. But here what we're talking about is, it's the testimony, those later witnesses that are coming, they're called iyatayachol hazima, they can't be falsified. The case could be that these later witnesses, these kosher witnesses that come, that they testify, that the balabayas brings them and they testify that he stole and he slaughtered or he sold, they actually brought those witnesses because the ganav is the one that told them to bring those witnesses. Because the ganav said in Bezdin, bifnei ploni uploni ganafti, I stole in front of so and so and so and so. Kidem afarish v'yazu, like we explained, v'yasu ploni uploni v'chulu, and then they actually come in. And so therefore, Rabbanan patri le laganav me'arba v'chamisha. The Rabbanan say you really only have an admission over here. So the Rabbanan say he's pater from 4 or 5 times the amount. El l'mishalim l'bayilim karen levado. He only has to pay to the original owner, the principal. That's what he admitted. V'hu notel kefil min harishonim, and he actually can take the double payment from those first witnesses. Sharatzu la'afsido kefil, because they they wanted to make him lose kefil. They originally came in and testified that he stole. Uknasa lo mashalim, and again he doesn't pay the fine. My time, what's the reason? Dahani sahadi basroi, because these later witnesses that come in ain't on edim. They're not even considered edim. De'inach yochol lahazimam. You're not able to falsify them. Well, l'kayim be'edazu din hazama. You can't fulfill the din of hazama with these edim. Sharei hu hoda tchila, because he's already admitted first shebifneim ganav, that it was in front of them that he stole. V'al piv bo lahoyed, and they're only testifying because of what he said. V'lav edus, that's not called edus. Hilka chamay mechayev eslei hodas piv. Therefore, why are you making him chayev? It's only because of his admission. Al piatzma lo yishalem knas, and he doesn't pay a fine through his admission. V'yaham milsa koi sumchus, and it's on this that sumchus is going. V'savar, and he holds edus she'atoichel azima edusi, that edus that can't be falsified is considered edus. Ve'edim hamuzamin mishalmen tashlumi kefil abaylim b'makom ganev, and therefore again the edim that were falsified, they have to pay kefil to the original owner in the place of the ganev. V'hu mishalim shlosh lapar, and then he's going to pay the additional 3 times the amount for the bull to asur sahadi the tavach u'machar, because there are witnesses that say that he slaughtered or sold it. But the Gemara continues, but don't we hold that edus she'ata yachol hazima is not edus? How can we say that Sumchus holds that edus she'ata yachol hazima is edus? And the Gemara explains, Hani mili hecha de lo yodi be'ez yom be'ez shah. When we say edus she'ata yachol hazima is not edus, that's if they testify, but they don't know what day, they don't know what time, as we said above. The lekol edus cloud, there you have no edus at all. It's impossible to falsify. But over here, he's just supporting what they said. That's not the same kind of edus she'ata yachol lahazima. And Rashi explains, Hani mili de lo have edus. When do we say it's not edus? Heicha de amri lo yadinan be'ez yom be'ez shah. That's when they say they don't know what day, they don't know what time. De'ikol amemar de lahachi avdi. Then you could say, you know why they're doing that? Mistafu, they're afraid. De lo lesu sadi de lizminu. They don't want to be falsified, so they don't want to say a time. V'alo ba'osa shah imanu hayisim. They're afraid others will come in and say you were with us at that time. Ve'edim shakranim heim, and they're liars. That's where we say that it's not an edus. Aval hacha, but over here, deha de'inat hayachol azima. Here where you can't falsify it. Hainu mishum de kushta kamisadi. That's just because they're telling the truth. Mikol shekain deidus and edus. Their edus is certainly a good edus. To see you a kamisai lahu, because he's supporting what they're saying. Hilga chachri, showing him. Therefore, again, the first witnesses shehuzmu who were falsified, mishalmin b'shvilo kefil, they pay on his behalf the kefil, which ultimately goes to the bailim. V'hu mishalim shlosha letashlume chamisha. The part he's going to pay the 3 times amount for the bull, ushnaim la'ayil, or the 2 times extra for the ram. The edus ika, that's considered that there is an edus here. V'hodah lekon, it's not considered to be an admission. Because again, he only admitted to the Geneva because he was afraid of the first witnesses. And the admission to the tficha is nothing because it's completely exempting him. That admission isn't causing any chiyuv, so it's not called a real admission. And the Gemara continues, Amar Mar, the master said, this was the opinion of Sumchus above, Hein Mishalman Tashlumei Kefil, it says that those original falsified witnesses, they have to pay the kefil payment that they were trying to obligate him. But the Gemara says, Midakamoda Dagana, but from the fact that he ultimately admits that he stole, Karen Boy Shalume, so he already has to pay the principal. Why are they paying the kefil? They shouldn't have to pay the principal plus the kefil payment. They should only have to pay the kefil payment because that's all they're really adding on. And the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Elazar Mishmei de Rav, Rabbi Elazar says in the name of Rav, Tani, the way it should be taught is as follows. And Rashi explains, Tashlume kefil Amar Sumchus Bechi Gavna de Kamoy Mishalman kefil. Again, Sumchus said that in this case, the first set of witnesses that are falsified, they pay kefil. Demashma keren v'kefil. That sounds like they're paying the keren and the kefil. V'yamai, why should that be the case? Kevan de kamodi v'amar ganafti, because if the case is that he's admitting and he says that I stole, so iu keren kaboy lishlume. He has to pay the keren. The bishlama knasa de kefil. I understand the extra fine, that extra part of the double payment. Have a kaboy la'afsude be'edus sheker ditu. That they're trying to make him lose with their false testimony. Ta'akati lo amin bedin, because he still hasn't went to court. V'ikol ameimar demoda miftar. It's possible that he could come in and he could have admitted and been potter. Ela Karen, but when it comes to the principle, hu mechuyev, he is chayev to pay that. V'koy, and he's standing in that chayev, he has that chayev. V'lo mafsid le'midi, so in terms of the Karen, they haven't really made him lose anything at all, and so why do they have to pay for that part? And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Vav Amud Aleph.